Today, Mark Blaxill joins me to talk about canaryparty.org. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Gigi. It's great to be on.
So tell us about canaryparty.org.
Well, Gigi, the Canary Party is a movement that was created to stand up for the victims of medical injury, environmental toxins, and industrial food. And we're really concerned about the just horrible explosion in childhood illness, vaccine injury, chronic illness across a number of population groups in America. And we're trying to do something about it.
When did you get involved with the canaryparty.org?
Well, we've only been at it for a couple of years. I've been involved in activism for longer than that. I have a daughter who was diagnosed with autism about 15, 16 years ago, and so that was the wake-up call for me. I started just trying to do the normal things that a responsible parent would do. I got involved in science policy. I wrote some scientific papers. I ended up writing a book on autism called The Age of Autism. Then we started realizing that information is the battlefield. We started our own blog called theageofautism.com. And then I think increasingly realized that these issues aren't about the science, they're about politics. And we are fighting with pop guns against a lot more powerful people. And the only thing we can do is recognize that it is political and to try to mobilize politically, mobilize at the grassroots. There are a lot of us, and try to recognize the nature of the struggle that we're in. So that's how we started the Canary Party. And we've only been at it for a short while.
At what point did you notice that the vaccines were actually causing a problem? When did you have that awakening? Was it one particular thing that hit you?
Well, the awakening, Gigi, was, when your own child is injured, and when she was born perfectly normal and developing beautifully and developing speech and socialized and all that sort of thing. And then when you see your child go away, and then you get just almost it's not a death sentence, but it's a sentence of lifelong disability when you get a diagnosis of autism. That's a wake-up call.
At what age did that happen?
We got the diagnosis when she was about 2 years, 9 months.
Wow.
But, she started to regress about a year or more before that. And then I think the thing you do as a medical consumer, you instantly mobilize and you say, what can I do for my child? And you go to all the usual suspects. You go to your doctor, you try to find the world's best experts. And the thing that you quickly realize if you're in the autism world is that all the world's greatest experts, and you put that in quotation marks, have no idea what they're talking about. They're pitching a story about autism and what's going on that is in total conflict with all the facts. They would tell us that it was genetic, that it was all in the brain, that there was nothing to do, there was no hope, there was no recovery. And if you reach out and just learn from your fellow parents, very, very quickly you learn that everything about that story was wrong. Most importantly, that there was a crisis, that rates of autism had exploded. My daughter was born in 1995, and I was in the middle of just an explosion of autism cases. And what you realize then is that the narrative doesn't include the idea that something must have happened to this generation of children, that you don't get a genetic epidemic, that when you see doubling, tripling, tenfold, 100-fold increases in the rate of autism, something must have happened. And then you ask the obvious question, well, what could it have been? And the thing that you quickly realize is that around 1990, shortly before, which is when the rates of autism went up, that's when they took the product liability shield, or they imposed a product liability shield onto vaccine manufacturers, and the vaccine schedule, the mandated vaccine schedule, took off. So that was sort of, you take a deep breath and you say, oh my Lord, that is so controversial. These people have so much power. They're going to fight this very hard. But that was my personal wake-up call for when I suspected the role of vaccines and their ingredients.
Was there one in particular that seemed to make it worse, or is it just a matter of volume or age?
Well, I think there's one ingredient, Gigi, that's particularly terrible, which is ethyl mercury. Organic mercury is one of the most toxic substances on the planet. I think it only trails plutonium. And they had it and still have it in vaccines that are injected into pregnant women and infants. And there's nothing more toxic that you can possibly imagine in your body being injected. That's a bad one. And then I think you just look at the overall intervention. The childhood immune system is something that has been developed over thousands and thousands of years as we've evolved. It's a very delicate balance. It's one of the most sensitive and important organs that we have. And we've decided as a health policy to impose this massive human experiment, which is this explosion in the intervention in childhood immune development. And we've never tested that intervention for safety. It's kind of nuts. So I think the overall intervention and the explosion into this bloated childhood vaccine schedule that we've got is also pretty suspect as well.
Is there something in particular that they tell you, oh, you have to have it by this age because? Is there some kind of rhetoric that they're using? I mean, what's the hurry to have an infant vaccinated like that?
Well, they tell you that you have to get everything right on time. They don't discriminate. Once you get a vaccine on the schedule, they're all in. They don't make distinctions about which one is more important than any other. I think that that there are some vaccines that are important. I am not an anti-vaccine person. I believe that vaccination probably ought to be rare but safe. And I think a lot of the things that we vaccinate against don't really require vaccination. But one of the ones I like, for example, is the rubella vaccine. If we had circulating rubella in the population, a pregnant woman who is infected with rubella will pass on some real risk of chronic disability to their unborn child. And so I think rubella vaccine is an example of a good vaccine. But there are a lot of them that are just nuts. But the public health authorities defend all of them as if every one of them is just the greatest gift to mankind.
Well, first of all, what is the excuse that they're saying they have to have mercury inside of these vaccines? Has anyone actually confronted them legally with this is mercury, it doesn't need to be in here? Has that happened?
Well, I think it's basically cost saving. Mercury is a preservative, and it allows you to have jumbo packs of vaccines so that you can reduce the packaging cost.
Yeah, but you could have a jumbo pack of plutonium. I mean, it doesn't mean it's right for the child.
Of course, it's ridiculous to have it. But the thing that's happened, Gigi, is that since we've protected all these vaccine manufacturers, we don't test these safety issues in a regular court of law. We test them in this program called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which is a government program run by not by judges, but a beast called a special master. The Department of Justice defends the government program, and all of the normal protections that a normal consumer would have in a court of law are compromised in this program. It's a broken and abusive program, and we need to roll it back.
And how do we do that?
Well, a first step is that I think there's growing recognition that the program has veered wildly away from its original intent in Congress, and I think you can take issue with the law, and I do think the law that was passed back in 1986, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act that created the VICP, was a mistake. But I think it's clear that back then there was a very noble intent among the authors and the congressional sponsors of that program. So I think there's a widening awareness that program has is seriously broken. And in November, we're all looking forward to a congressional hearing into the functioning of the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. That hearing's being held in the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to shine a light on the abuse that we see in the program, the fraud, the cover-up that we see among the bureaucrats that run the program, and the cost that that's imposing on American society more broadly. And
that act that was put in place in 1986, I believe it was, is there not any way to reverse it? Well, like any act of Congress, you can be repealed, it can be reformed. I think the first step is to really investigate what the problems are with this act and shine a light on the people that have been running it. Well, I suppose the best thing to do then is to create a Protection for the Citizens Act so that you can at least stop the vaccines from going out. You know? Well, I think anytime you create a special protected class of product, you put at risk the well-known protections of courts of law and a free market. What we have here is the furthest thing in the vaccine market or in the vaccine program from a free market. We have the federal government researching and approving vaccines. We have them mandating vaccines, requiring them for entry into the school system. We have them covering the backs of the vaccine manufacturers if they do in fact cause injury. And so everything about this product is as far away from free choice, free markets, free rights of consumer redress that you could possibly imagine. Mark, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to hearing what happens in November. Thank you for having me. If you want to learn more about the vaccine epidemic, go to InfoWarsShop.com and check out this combo pack. It is the Greater Good DVD and the Vaccine Epidemic. It's a book, and you can get both of them together at InfoWarsStore.com. I'm Gigi Arnetta. Thank you for joining me on the InfoWars Nightly News, and don't forget, next week at 7 p.m.